It's time now for Football at 4. Every day on the Sports Bash at 4 p.m., John McMullen joins us, Eagles Insider, NFL Insider at 97.3 ESPN.com, as well as on Twitter at JF McMullen. John, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Josh. Happy preseason game 2 to you.
Yeah, get in. Get excited, right?
Unless you played in that Hall of Fame game. That's even worse. Then it's 3.
Well, John, over at 97.3 ESPN.com, you did give out your annual training camp awards. So I want to hit on some of those, as well as let people know actually who on earth is playing tonight. Because as we talked with Mike DiRocco, even the Jaguars, they've suffered so many injuries that they're not even putting some guys out there tonight, which is a part of the reason why Foles isn't playing tonight. So We'll try to give the people at least something to look forward to in tonight's game, aside from Millville's own Raquel Armstead. But as you did write at 97.3 ESPN.com, some guys you wanted to highlight. And one of the guys that I'm going to be watching tonight again is the guy that you gave the award for Best Rookie. Andre Dillard, in that first game, he was really, really good, John. And you are even giving him the Best Rookie award. So I think it goes without saying that this guy has lived up to the expectations of being a first-round pick so far.
Yeah, he certainly has looked it. You should be the best rookie. I mean, that's not a surprise. It shouldn't be a surprise if you're the first-round pick. And really, most people projected Dillard to go ahead of where he went to the Eagles. So he's a significant talent. And he showed it, and he's been as advertised, particularly as a pass blocker, and that's all they did is pass football at Washington State. So he's way ahead of the curve, and the concerns are run blocking, and I do think he needs some work there, and part of it is just and this happens with a lot of college kids. They need a year to get stronger and grow into their bodies and become what the NFL calls functional football strength. So that part you kind of understand with any offensive lineman. But Jeff Stoutland constantly talks about him and says he's so athletic that he's able to take the teachings and understand the surface of a block and get there quickly. And if you can do all that stuff, you're probably going to be pretty good. And that's what Stout said about him.
You also, tongue-in-cheek, gave him the award for best fighter as he's been involved in multiple dust-ups. But I think it's a good thing, John, because at least he's showing that he's got that edge, something that people had that question about him. Does he have that nasty side to him? Because he seems like a really nice human being from the interviews I've seen. So it's good to see that he could turn that switch on the football field.
Yeah, offensive line is one of those things in society where you're supposed to be nasty, even though it's not a good thing to do in normal life. So it's kind of a tough fence to straddle. And there's always you don't see a lot of really laid back offensive linemen. There's a couple ways. I mean, Jason Peters is very laid back, but that's because everybody's scared of him. So he can afford to be. It's like the big dog in the house. But yeah, it's nice to see some nastiness, and he's gotten into 3 fights over the past week, and he got emotional about it, and Doug Peterson had to talk to him, and Stout had to talk to him. Howie Roseman even talked to him. So you got to keep that stuff under control and be able to not let it hurt the team on the field. But it's all good signs for Andre Dillard early on.
Another award you gave out sticking with the offensive line was Isaac Seumalo. This is a guy, when he was drafted a couple of years ago, I think there at least wasn't consensus from everybody around the organization, whether it's people who cover the team or the messages we got from the coaching staff about what exactly his role was going to be long term. And I think some people thought he might become a center. He's been getting opportunities at left guard, and it really seems like that he has really stepped up and become a much better player, the player that at least Jeff Stoutland believed he could be all along.
Yeah, and I think part of it is they wanted him to succeed, and they pushed him into a starting job before he probably deserved it, and he didn't play well early during the Super Bowl season, got benched. Then it took a step back, and if you remember, a lot of people were questioning because he was so bad early in the season back in 2017. Some people were thinking maybe they cut him. That's how bad it was when they moved on. Instead, they gave him the job back and put him back there. And part of the reason why is he's so much more athletic than Stefan Wisniewski. And that's what Stoutland likes. He likes his offensive linemen to get out and move. Jason Kelsey being obviously the most notable. He's just so athletic for that particular position. Sayamalo's got a lot of those traits at guard, and ultimately they think center may be his best position. But I also think it's ironic because back in college, everyone talked about his versatility. He played every position on the offensive line except left guard, and that's where the Eagles put him. So he had to learn the position as well. That's the one position he hadn't played. And I think if you go back to that Baltimore game during his rookie season, and he was forced to play right tackle, that kind of tells you he can play all over. He's a smart guy. He understands, and he's really taken off. So everyone looks at him as the weak link of that offensive line, and rightfully so, because he got all pros and Hall of Famers and Pro Bowlers. So he is the weak link, but that weak link is getting stronger and stronger.
John, you wrote a fantastic article on the 97.3 ESPN website in regards to Josh Adams. There are a few players battling with their backs against the wall, whether it is Adams, Smallwood, Pumphrey. I was just curious on how you think this running back position will play out after the four of Miles Sanders, Howard, Sproles, and Clement.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. First, that the Eagles keep five because it's conceivable they only keep four. And that, if that's the case, then everybody's gone in that category. If they keep five, I think Josh has a chance for this reason. And the fact that, remember, Jordan Howard comes in here on the final year of his rookie deal, and it's very unlikely he'll be back because two things are going to happen. He's going to have a really good year and get a lot of money, and the Eagles don't value that position and just drafted Miles Sanders in the second round, or he's going to have a bad year, and they're not going to want him back. So a lot of times when you talk about roster structure and how you put it together, people only think about right now, the immediacy of it. But you sort of have to serve two masters if you're good at it. And Howie Roseman is going to be looking at this and saying the same thing I said. Jordan Howard's probably one and done. So if I want to keep that dynamic and have that big, powerful back to complement with Miles Sanders, who's more well-rounded, well, who fits that description on this roster besides Jordan Howard? It's Josh Adams. And remember, he led this team in rushing last year. I think a lot of people forget that. And he was once a legitimate Heisman Trophy candidate at Notre Dame before he hurt his foot and because of that dropped in the draft. So when people look at pedigree and they say he's undrafted, he is, but he wouldn't have been. So there's more to him than the typically undrafted player, more talent. The Eagles understand that. I'm not saying it's likely he's going to make the roster. The odds are still against him. But people have forgotten about him. And I think if he does play well in the rest of the preseason, hurt himself by putting the football on the ground against Tennessee, he's got to play well. But I think he can get back in the conversation.
John McMullen joining us on the Boardwalk on the hotline on 97.3 ESPN. You can follow on Twitter at JF McMullen for all your Eagles and NFL news. Speaking of running back, John, you mentioned a lot of names there. You mentioned Howard, you mentioned Sanders, you mentioned Adams. But what about the other guy? It seems like Corey Clement is kind of becoming a forgotten man at this point. What do the prospects look like for him to potentially make the team? And if he even makes the team, what kind of role would he even have?
Well, yeah, I mean, he's sort of a little bit ahead of what we just talked about with Josh. Same kind of conversation in that he's largely been forgotten because you have three distinct roles, and then those are going to go to Jordan Howard, Miles Sanders, and Darren Sproles. So in theory, everybody kind of defaults to him as the fourth back. And he's finally healthy and he's finally practicing again. Had that knee injury that is a little bit murky. He never fully told us what it was. Some people reported it was a torn ACL. He claimed it wasn't, but he wouldn't confirm exactly what it was. Maybe it was an MCL. So getting healthy was the first part, and now he's got to start proving he can be what he was before, and that was a pretty well-rounded guy. Another undrafted guy similar to Josh in the fact that he probably has more talent than that and probably should have been drafted. But, yeah, he's in that category, and I would put Mac Hollins in this category as well, that people default to and assume they're going to make the roster. And if they don't play well the rest of the preseason or more injuries crop up, I don't think those two guys specifically are guaranteed roster spots.
John, sticking on the offensive side of the ball, now with Shelton Gibson no longer here, what kind of impact do you think that has on the back end of the wide receiver depth, and what could we see tonight that might impact the wide receivers? Because we know who the top guys are. It's Deshaun Jackson. It's Alshon. They're going to keep J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. I think I'm saying his name right. I'm totally confused. It's Arcega. I'm totally confused what this guy's name is at this point.
This week. We'll see. We'll see about next week.
Right, we'll see about next week. But we have an idea of who the main wide receivers are. So now without Shelton Gibson in the mix, how does that affect the rest of the group? And who could we expect to see tonight and how their impact, their performance might have on the Eagles' decision?
Well, I know a lot has to do with special teams, and I think that's one thing where Charles Johnson kind of stood out. He didn't have the reputation of being a special teams player, but he made a big play in coverage against Tennessee. And maybe he's starting to fit into that type of role where he can get a leg up. Again, it depends. Are you keeping 5 or 6? 4 are making it, and that's Alshon, Deshaun, Nelson Aguilar, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. And people default to Mac Hollins. I'm not sure they should. He's back practicing now, coming back from his latest injury, which was a hip. It'll be interesting to see if he plays tonight. He was back in team drills, so he should. He needs to be out there. But I tell you, we brought up Mac to Mike Rowe, and it was not good if you read the transcript, and the body language was worse, basically saying he's got to get on the field. So I think that is a clear indication that he needs to do more to make this football team, and he's now on the brink of teetering off the 53-man roster. However, I think some of the other guys have fallen back as well. Lately, Greg Ward, who had a good start, Mark and Michelle, good start. They've kind of wavered. So all of a sudden, we talked about all these bodies and who's going to make it. Are they keeping 6? Can one of those guys push? Everybody's kind of started to fall off, except I would say Charles Johnson. And then you have to bring in age, because I don't think people realize Charles is 30 years old. He's been around for a while. So this team, one of the traits of this team you could be concerned about, maybe even should be, there's a lot of age on this team. So I'm not sure you want to add a plus 30 receiver as the 5th or 6th guy on your roster.
Speaking of the other guys, John, Greg Ward, Braxton Miller, they played quarterback in college. Are either of them considered the emergency quarterback in case something happens to Kessler or Thorsten tonight?
Yeah, that's where they would go, certainly. Both have a ton of experience at the college level playing quarterback, and successfully, both of them. So, yeah, those would be the emergency quarterbacks if they're on the roster in the regular season as well. I don't think Braxton is a guy, we don't even mention him. He's very nondescript camp. It's not even been bad. You just don't notice him. And that's not a good thing. And he just hasn't made enough plays. But if Greg Ward could find a way on this team and is active on game day. We know how this team does things. And at some point, if he's active or somebody of that ilk is active, they're going to throw out a trick play. I don't think there's any question about that.
Yeah, Trey Burton, Philly special, comes to mind. Just saying. So use him as a decoy.
They always do it. And these are real quarterbacks.
Yeah, Trey
was a quarterback back in high school.
Yeah, he was a high college recruit.
Yeah, he was. He certainly was, and obviously, as I said, if you look at some of the numbers, well, everybody knows how successful Braxton was at Ohio State. But if you look at Greg Ward's numbers at Houston as well, he was a solid quarterback.
John, let's flip it over to the defense. Is there a position or positions that you're keeping an eye on tonight that you think could have a serious impact on the final 53-man roster on defense?
Yeah, it's always linebacker. I mean, they're so jumbled at linebacker right now. A lot of it has to do with the fact that Nigel is not cleared yet. So he's the one constant, who's going to be on the field. And there's no concern for week one. He's in that category with Fletcher Cox, and now they shut down Lane Johnson and Dallas Goedert. That's just to get him healthy to week one. He's in that category. But for that second linebacker spot, it was going to be Camus Grugier, who was having one of the best camps of anybody. And when I did those awards, I mean, he would have been most improved and to the point he got injured. He was having a great camp. So that set him back a little bit, certainly early in the season. And there's no clear winner in that second linebacker role when Nigel does come back. Nate Gerry's gotten probably the most first-team snaps. But if you look at him and you watch the film, he's exactly what you would think he would be. If you know his history, he's a safety at Nebraska, and he looks like a safety playing linebacker still. He's really good in coverage, and he's just Velcroed to people in run support. So I'm not sure that's going to work long term as a full-time player, as a sub-package player, maybe. And Zach Brown's the exact opposite. Great defending the run, sort of an old-school linebacker, but you don't want him in space. And then you have L.J. Fort, who is kind of okay at both, but not great at either. And then there's the lesser names like T.J. Edwards and Alex Singleton, players like that. So that's the position probably when we came into camp with the most questions. Camus was answering some of them, but now that he's hurt, you have some of the same questions.
John, another guy who is no longer with the team anymore because of an injury waiver is Blake Countess. What impact do you think that could have on the reps in the preseason as well as on the final 53?
Well, it's interesting. I think the Cravon LeBlanc injury can shuffle things a little bit because if you assume Jalen Mills starts on the PUP list, then all of a sudden we had all assumed there would be 6 corners on this team. Well, maybe it's 5 corners and 5 safeties now. Mm-hmm. And then you start talking about, can Trey Sullivan make it as the 5th safety? But Jonathan Cyprien coming in late, I think is, you know who the top 4 are going to be, and it's all the veterans, Malcolm Jenkins, Rodney McLeod, Andrew Sendeo, and Jonathan Cyprien. So the question is, can a Trey Sullivan show enough on special teams to say, while we wait for Cravon to get healthy, maybe that's how you go about it and do 5 corners and 5 safeties. So more of Blake Countess was, if you remember when they picked him off waivers, he was a draft pick here in Philadelphia. They wanted him back on the practice squad. He signed with the Rams. Turned into a decent special teams player. And the Eagles picked him up on waivers and gave him an extension. So he was in the plans to be on this team. You don't give somebody an extension if you don't think they're going to be a part of this team. But then they were able to get Cyprien. and he got hurt with a hamstring that was going to keep him out for a number of weeks. So that's how quickly things change in the NFL. And Blake's a perfect example of that.
John, one more before we get out of here, and I appreciate your time here on a Thursday. Again, Eagles-Jaguars tonight at 6 o'clock. Pre-game coverage starts kickoff after 7 here on 97.3 ESPN. We had Mike DiRocco on just less than an hour ago, and I thought Deshaun brought up a great question to Mike DiRocco about the fact that, Nick Foles, his history of success as a starting quarterback has not really been consistently great. And I have to wonder, John, from your perspective, DiRocco and Deshaun were talking about the fact that, look, Nick Foles, the last 2 times he started a season, he didn't finish the season as a starter. And in Philadelphia, you could argue that it was the perfect situation for him to be successful. And I'm not sure if that situation in Jacksonville is completely conducive for him to have the same success that he had in Philadelphia.
No, it's not. And that's what we talked about with Nick, and we've tried to explain to people and the fact that he's probably best suited for the role he was in here as sort of a closer. He's had a difficult time getting through 16 games in his career. Even when Chip was here and he was a starter here, he was injured. So you have concern, and remember, there's a vast difference in offensive lines. You're going from one of the best in the league, certainly top 5. Pro Football Focus rated them number 1 overall, to a team that has issues on the offensive line. So that's number 1. And hopefully you get the running game going with Leonard Fournette, and that will help Nick. But it's until he plays 16 games, you can say the same thing about Carson Wentz, and Carson knows it over the past 2 seasons. People are going to question, can he hold up for 16 games? And it's a fair question.
Follow him on Twitter at JF McMullen for all your Eagles and NFL news. Check out all of his work at 97.3 ESPN.com. You can hear his full list of John's training camp awards, as well as his latest article on Josh Adams. John, appreciate your time. We'll catch up with you tomorrow.
All right. Thanks, Josh. Enjoy preseason week 2.
Preseason week 2. Listen, I'm watching no matter what. I got to watch my guy, Raquel Armstead, get some reps against the Eagles.